We didn't want to do the off-grid thing. We didn't want to do, like, pooping in a bucket.
In an upcoming episode of the Homesteady podcast, Kay and I sat down to talk about why we wanted to live in a yurt and why we finally decided, despite our dream, it was a bad idea for us.
This is actually an idea we had years ago when our son was born. Apartment we were living in, the house sold. We were going to build a yurt. That was a dream of ours for a long time, was yurt life.
A dream I don't think we'll ever see to fruition. If you don't know what a yurt is, much like your dad didn't, at the time we pitched the crazy idea that we were going to move his new grandson into a yurt. Basically a tent.
A yurt, he said.
A yurt is traditionally a building that comes from Mongolian peoples out in the steppes of Eurasia.
Одоо яраса гэрийн мод болоод ерөнхийдөө хэвэн бүрэн бослаа. Яг цаг хугацаанд болчихно гэсэн үг. Нүрээс бүгэд оёгтал тэгээ гэр бүрэглээ гэсэн.
They make these circular canvas tents with kind of a dome top. They're easy to set up, and then they're easy to tear down, and they can move them around the Eurasian steppe with their family and their animals.
Yeah, for nomadic living.
Nomadic living. So easy to set up, easy to take down, not too expensive. And it's very popular in the homesteading world. Most of you probably know exactly what a yurt is because comment below on YouTube. Most of you have probably at one point in time wanted to live in a yurt.
Yeah.
You know you're out there.
It was one of our options because it was an option.
It was one of the options.
It was one of the options because of the ease of site prep, kind of construction, and you could really retrofit it to be what you need for your family.
It wasn't the only option.
Option number 2 was 1,000 square foot space above a pole barn on the property that was unfinished. Basically just, it had electric, and that was it.
We came to our audience on YouTube. We said, hey,
we want to know what you think. Pros and cons. Are we not thinking of certain things? This is very new. Last couple days we've been talking about these two ideas. Do we go yurt? Do we go apartment building? Leave us in the comments below pros and cons you can think of to both. Help us make this decision. Choose your own adventure.
Plus, if anybody out there has done either one of these things, please let us know.
Yeah, if you've lived with a family of 6,
what would you do?
What would you do? How many kids do you have, and then what would you do? Either way, it's going to be interesting, but it's only going to be for about 5 months-ish through the summer.
Yeah, you know how construction goes though. It could easily be longer than that.
Not going to be too hopeful about just 5 months. If it's 6 or 7, okay. Not going to be perfect, but nothing ever is.
My parents are lovely people, and I'm sure they'll try as hard as they can to finish the house.
They watch our videos.
There were pros and cons to both. A lot of people like the idea of the yurt. It's beautiful and scenic and different. When we moved out of the yurt, we could use it as like an Airbnb or a guest place for people to stay in if they're coming to visit us. And it's a yurt, so that's just kind of cool. Yurts are fun.
Which way were you leaning? Like,
Again,
Personally.
Yurt's been like a dream for us,
I know.
which is funny. It's so silly. But like yurts have kind of been a thing we've wanted to do for a long time. I think I wanted, like, someday I want to live or build a yurt. I don't know. But I knew practically the yurt was probably not the right decision for us.
For a few reasons, we also wanted to turn the tiny apartment above the pole barn into a guest space someday as well, and a studio space for Austin to use. A yurt would never have had that kind of room to be able to have the yurt be a guest space and a studio space.
Right. The largest yurt you're generally going to find, the Colorado Yurt Company was one of the companies we were looking at. They have a 30-foot around diameter, basically a 700 square feet yurt. But again, yurts are round, and so you lose a lot of usability in the roundness. You got to kind of design to a circle, which is one of the cool things about the yurt in
Yes.
you know, when you're waxing poetic, but when you just have a big family and you need a lot of functionality out of a small space. I think pretty much out of the gate we knew the better option was not the yurt. It was the fact that there was already this building built
Right.
that we could just move into.
Yeah, there was a structure already there. Another reason is just yurts, like when you buy a kit from a company, they don't end up being a super inexpensive option.
The big one, again, the 700 square foot yurt, I looked today. If you were to get a 700 square foot yurt up on a brand new property, right? You just buy the kit, you get insulation for the walls, insulation for the roof. I also checked for the
Insulation.
wind and snow package.
Yeah, we would need that
So
here.
here we would need wind and snow. We would need insulation for roof and walls, and the big 700. So that kit just right out the gate is 16,000 and change. That doesn't include site work. So
Right.
you do have to prep a pad and probably build a platform to put that onto. And then you also have to, if you're going to live there a long time, you're probably going to want some form of electricity, some form of plumbing, definitely some heating, other than maybe you could do a wood stove. But the fact is, the yurt, other than a cheap shell, is not that much cheaper than a small building or tiny home
Right.
if you're going to make it, you know, have electricity and plumbing and all the things that you want if you're a large family for what turned out to be almost a year for us. Again, some of you watching or listening are like, I love a yurt, I would love a yurt. And so for those people, sure, but it's true. It's not, the lifespan on a yurt is not like lifespan on a pole barn,
And,
a
right.
hard stick-built building.
Now, I would say, if we were moving onto this property from scratch, there was no house, we knew eventually we would get into the house. So how much we put into our temporary living really helped us to decide to go for the apartment, because with the yurt, even if you look into solar, because we were going to do solar, electricity, right? You're going to heat with wood, and then
Yeah, we looked into
the
all kinds of
plumbing,
stuff.
like, do you do composting
Compost
toilet? There's so
toilet.
many things that go into it
Yeah.
that really would have been over our budget for what we had to put towards temporary housing, because that stuff all has an initial cost. Solar, all that stuff. More than you expect it to.
If you're thinking about moving on to a homestead and you're trying to make this decision, like yurt or do I put up a small cabin or building, I don't think yurt is the solution to most people's problems because of the nature of it having a short lifespan. If you're going to use it seasonally on a property you don't yet live at, and you're just going to camp out for the summer, and you're not worried about plumbing long-term and electricity, then sure, it could be a nice way to have like a vacation place that might someday you build a house on. But for what we needed, which was really a home for almost a year for a large family, we didn't want to do the off-grid thing. We didn't want to
No.
do like, pooping in a bucket. I think for us, we realized there wasn't much savings to a yurt, and it didn't make sense.
Yeah, that's how we decided to go for the tiny house, the tiny apartment above the pole barn.
This was a snippet of an upcoming episode of the Homesteady podcast. Subscribe on iTunes if you have an iPhone, on Stitcher or Google Play if you have an Android, or wait to watch it right here on YouTube when the video comes out. You can click right here to subscribe to our podcast.